Hello everybody, Victoria Honorado here with Family Legal Action Foundation. Thank you for joining us. I got two guests today who are alienated dads, and we're going to kind of have a round table today. We have Adam and we have Wayne, and we're going to get into a discussion in a minute. Please get out your pen and paper and write this information down. Let me zoom this in. There we go, much better. Let's see, there we go. Write down this information. If you have any questions or would like to contact me in regards to anything on the show this evening or for the foundation, or you would like to get involved, be a supporter, just please contact me with this information here. All right, so Adam, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
You both have grown children. You both have two boys each, between 18 and 22, 23, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give you the floor in a second. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about the effects of what alienation has done through the years and how difficult it is. I know there's a lot of dads out there and even some moms who are going through the alienation, and it's very difficult to understand because there are so many different patterns that are involved with the different transitions that children have to go through. And it is very hard on the kids, but it's also much harder on the parent who is a targeted parent. So Adam, I'm gonna give you the floor, and I'm gonna let you guys talk it out, and just talk about what the effects have been with your kids and how you've had struggled with trying to make a relationship through the last several years with your children. One of them you have a relationship with, and the other you're struggling with, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you go ahead and talk about what alienation does with families.
You know, I think one thing I would start out with is when it begins to happen, unless you're already familiar with it, you don't know it's happening.
Correct. Right.
And it took me a while to figure out, I'm kind of a research-oriented kind of person. It took me a while to figure out what was going on, and as I was doing some research, I was reading some things and said, wow, they are describing my family, how did they know? And as it turns out, the patterns are fairly similar from case to case, and then I realized because the patterns were so tight, that this must be what was actually going on. In our case, I got remarried in 2010, started to get alienated from my two boys.
How old were they at that point? Roughly.
I gotta think for a minute. 15 and 10.
Okay, so they're teen and preteen. So,
Yeah,
okay.
teen and preteen.
All right.
But it's some months after I got remarried when things started to get kind of strange, and probably figured out sometime later what was really going on. And late 2011, things were getting bad, particularly with my oldest son, and by October 2012, I was completely shut out from both boys. And later part of 2012, when I figured out what was going on, I hired an attorney. We wanted to bring in a GAL. This person ended up acting in more of a child rep capacity. And he was pretty instrumental in ultimately reestablishing some contact with my younger son. And
now, just for the audience, up until that point when you noticed there were changes after you got married, you had visitation before this was happening?
Oh, yeah.
And so everything was going fine with the visitation,
Absolutely.
and then you started seeing a change once you got married. Because I know that there are a lot of parents out there who are facing this kind of being targeted in this way because you are starting your life over again, and you may have a second family. So I'm just kind of doing a.
I think my speculation is that that's exactly right. I think there also could be another component coming into play here, and that is, and I believe it to be the case in my case, but it's just my opinion, that as the boys started to bond with their extended step family, I think that became threatening to my ex-wife, and then that's when some pretty strange things began to happen. But basically from 2012 to the later part of 2014, I had no contact with either son, but was at that point able to get court-ordered and court-supported visitation. with the younger one. The older one was turning 18. The older one was turning 18, and everyone just kind of threw in the towel on that. So it was a long, difficult couple of years till our relationship kind of sort of normalized.
And during this time, Adam, when you noticed that your sons were going through this, and when you finally did get to start seeing them again, or you got into their lives again, there's been a lot of radical changes done by that point, where
Oh, yeah.
there was, you saw a big change in your boys, and they just didn't want any part of it. Were they removing themselves from you and your new family? Were they
Well,
introverted? What were they doing? What were the signs for you?
well, their school attendance plummeted. They both showed signs of depression and or anxiety. And within this stuff churning up, I suddenly became somebody that, quote unquote, they were fearful of, a dangerous person, good for nothing. My older son called me a deadbeat, unprovoked. None of it is true. And
A lot of dads seem to be going through that.
yeah.
Wayne, you know that all too well as well, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, again, I ultimately got court-ordered visitation, and had it not been for the court action, and in this particular portion of it, I'll give the judge some credit, I wouldn't have a relationship with him now, I'm sure. My older son, I still don't have a relationship with. I will write to him and do what I can. He won't have anything to do with me at the moment, but I'm optimistic. As many children do when they become adults, they kind of figure things out.
And not only that, but they face difficulties and things and challenges of their own as adults, and then they realize, wow, this is what my mom or my dad was going through. I get it now. And until they get to that point, I'm seeing many parents and kids are facing exactly what you're describing, and I tell them they're going to have to figure it out when they end up facing something tragic or life-altering or decision-making that's going to make them go, I can't do this by myself, or wow, how did my mom or my dad do it?
Right.
So, that takes time.
It takes a catalyst, like you said, and what we have to understand is these kids are dug in. And they are really dug in, so they need a faith-saving way to come back around and reconnect with the targeted parent, whether it be a mother or father. They just need to experience...
And you're going to be there waiting for them.
Both parents,
Absolutely.
and that's how they're wired. It's natural. We just, if that's not happening, it's because something is interfering with a hardwired, very natural thing. And I think that's something that most judges don't understand. I think it's something that most therapists don't understand.
No, how could they? If you had advice to offer somebody, parents right now watching, that are in this or may possibly be facing it in a couple of years with children that they're, what would you say to them as a positive outlook for children who are actually distancing themselves, or they're not being able to have the kind of time to have a loving bond with them, and they're now, or maybe they're like you and Wayne, where you lost that connection for a while, and now the children are hardened and they're desensitized with that loving relationship you once had. It's hard. So what would you say to parents?
Well, the first thing I would say is have hope, and this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Things are not going to change overnight, but they can change quickly when things are ready to change.
Yes.
And I don't know what the statistics are, but if you're not able to reunite with your children while they're still kids, there is a large percentage of them that do figure it out. So keep the door open.
Don't give up, in other words. Don't give up. Do not give up on your children.
Do not give up, but at the same time, don't destroy yourself in the process. You know, by the time you recognize what's happening to you and the absolute devastation of it, you have to transcend it. It's been a growing experience for me, a difficult one, but a growing one. And, you know, I think there's a couple stages to it. I think the first thing is to recognize what's going on and to educate yourself about it.
Sure.
I think the next stage is probably the hardest, particularly when you can't make a change that you know really needs to happen for your kids and for yourself, and that's to accept whatever's going on. Now, accepting doesn't mean giving up. But, just like a tree won't break in the wind if it sways a little bit. You have
Sure.
to accept the things you cannot change.
Because once they age out, I noticed that when they're on their own, they're like, oh my God, goodbye, I'm gone, and I have my own life now. But then all of a sudden, then they stop and they come to a screeching halt. Like, well, wait a second, I get to make my own decisions now. I get to see that parent that I was prevented from being with and having that relationship.
Right.
And so, I'm gonna talk to Wayne a little bit, and then I'm gonna let you guys just talk for a few minutes in this. And you also are in that same situation where you had that distance in the years. It was going good. You had visitation with your children, and then all of a sudden things just were upheavaled, and then these false allegations because circumstances change in your life, and then the allegations started, and then that went back to court, and then it started a whole mess again for you. And your children got caught up in it, right?
It's interesting how aligned Adam and my experiences are. There are things that are different about it, but when you were speaking, I remembered back to how when I began a serious relationship with a person after the divorce was finalized and my ex-wife was already remarried, that's when she started the alienation process. And again, you mentioned the key point that she somehow felt threatened by that. And so that was kind of the catalyst and the starting point. Was she tried to make it, because my kids enjoyed being over we were together and then we lived together, so I don't remember if we were living together yet or whatnot, but when we were all together as a family and blending with her youngest children, it became something that the kids were enjoying, and she decided to thwart it.
And she just couldn't stand that. So it was okay for her to start her life over, but it wasn't okay for you or for your children to be happy with you.
I don't know what goes on inside her mind, but
sure.
That was the beginning point of it. And then an incident occurred with my oldest son where something happened at a family get-together that I really didn't approve of his behavior. Nobody would have approved of his behavior. We had a discussion about it afterwards. It was at a family holiday, and we got home, and he pointed a Nerf gun in my face and hit me with that, and I reacted, and that got blown up into a
Blown out of
whole,
proportion.
let's prevent this dangerous person from seeing his kids.
She made you out to be a bad guy without being present at that situation, understanding. Didn't want to
and
know
she
it.
did,
And she just ran away with it and went to the courts, and then it just snowballed from there.
And she's the narrator who narrates the sequence, even though she wasn't
And
there.
so then that led up to you going
but let me interject that.
Oh,
Here,
sure.
What happens in the court system is tragic. In Cook County court system in Illinois, because this court system allowed these inequities to go on, and there was a child rep appointed, and that person never had one iota of interest in reuniting me with my kids or helping me
Was it a
and my
GAL?
kids get together. Yes,
Guardian ad litem?
GAL,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
And just sucking $350 an hour out of us. And a high-priced lawyer on my ex-wife's side, and the court, with the particular judge that we have, was only too happy to just see it one way and never even think about rectifying or correcting the situation.
So on top of raping you financially and making you go through financial hardship because the court systems are prejudiced and biased, you were lucky and one of the few lucky ones that did have some help there. But for the majority of them, it is very biased and prejudiced, and it is very corrupt, and it is one-sided, and dads are discriminated against.
It's not always dads, but in this case it happens
yes,
to be.
there's a small small percentage of women now, and it's starting to rise because
Yeah.
they're trying to level the playing field. So, of course, then they made you out to be the bad person, so.
I was the bad person. That could keep it going in court because we have to check back and see if the bad person's behaving any better. Everybody wins when there's more time spent on the case. Her lawyer, my various lawyers that I went through, the GAL, the judge needs a full docket to justify her salary and her court presence.
I've heard that from more than one person. Many people say that.
Yeah, and then what the court system does, or this particular judge does, is they bleed you until you can't afford it anymore, and then once you're pro se, meaning you're your own lawyer, you're defending yourself, then they can do whatever they want to you.
And you get to that point of pro
you-
se because you can no
because
longer
you can't
afford
afford
an
it
attorney.
anymore.
Because
Right.
they've already
Right.
broken you financially.
Or they're saying, hey, you're not paying your child support, you gotta come into court and talk to us about it. How can you afford to pay a lawyer when they're hitting you with that
Correct.
because your whole life is falling apart?
Correct.
Basically.
So I'm gonna let you guys go ahead and have the round table and talk about the kids and where do we go from here now with you guys with the kids? And I know each of you has one child where you're connected with and the other child where you're having some difficulty. So
Well, mine doesn't stem from difficulty, it stems from the fact that I haven't seen my youngest son in 6 years. And so basically, when I stopped being able to afford my own legal counsel, and I was seeing my kids for a while under supervised visitation, which was just ridiculous, and I stopped being able to pay $75 an hour for that, $150 just to see my kids for 2 hours. Then the court said, okay, well, if you're not going to pay for a sitter, I forgot the word. What's
Observer.
no.
Oh, for a supervisor?
Supervised visitation,
supervisor.
thank you.
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
Or as I like to call it, high-priced babysitter.
Right.
Then you can't see your kids, and then the ex-wife, meanwhile, was already coaching my son that he was afraid of the supervisor that I was our supervised visitation supervisor, and she happened to be the head of the company that everybody uses for supervised visitation, and a really sweet lady and whatnot, and just, oh, your son doesn't want to see her anymore. It's like, oh, well, who can help me then? Well, you got to find it, and then they lie. Years down the road, when I brought that up again, the judge said, no, we offered to help you. You didn't want any help, and it's just insane, and you have
It's a
to
vicious,
deal with
cycle.
the worst rejection possible, and being told that you're not fit to be a parent is a slap in the face, and it's demeaning and alienating, and the kids were totally alienated from the whole experience. Yeah.
I think Wayne brought up something that's really important in these cases. When you're a targeted parent and the powers that be don't understand it, you're held to a standard that's superhuman, and that's basically a perfection standard. So any other parent, including the judges, including the lawyers, including the therapists, are allowed to be good parents, but imperfect parents, and that's perfectly fine. And in fact, it is perfectly fine because our kids are resilient. They need good, loving parents. They don't need perfect parents. But any misstep, any lack of perfection can be exploded into some enormous travesty, and the whole narrative that goes with that, and use it as a reason to suddenly, this father or mother that's, been a loving, caring, close father for 18 years is suddenly dangerous. And when judges make a mistake, they make a mistake to cover their behinds. And that's, but what they're not recognizing is they're trading in one potential abuse, which is illogical to begin with an actual abuse that exists.
Right. And what I don't understand is that in all of the hundreds, maybe thousands of parents I've spoken to in so many different areas, we have so many different stats that prove what these children go through, what anything from a toddler to an aged out 18-year-old, and at different stages of going through a divorce, and their behavior and just acting out and just saying, I hate you, you're not a good dad. I mean, a lot of them, including my own son, is going through that. So they already know this, but yet the courts are just refusing to acknowledge that these are stats. Instead, they're blaming parents for what these children are doing and saying and thinking, instead of going by what we actually have by medical stats from the AMA and the APA, and they're totally ignoring it. And I don't understand it for the life of me. You're going to blame this human being called a mom and a dad when you know perfectly well that all of this trauma and all of the drama involved is a big part of why these kids are acting out, or why. And the courts have every avenue accessible to them and every right to rule in a way that these children can have both parents, and the parents can still teach their kids not to act that way, and they do not give the parents like you dads to do this, and especially with you, what was going on with all of that. But still, I mean, to do not allow that.
I don't have an answer for it.
I know.
I agree with you. It's maddening. The one thing I can speculate is, in my experience and just the way I view people who act in ways that are contrary to common sense, contrary to evidence, contrary to what best science would indicate, is that people do what everyone else does. People do what they've done, and that seems to kind of drive these actions. And I'll give you one example. As you know, I've been involved in some shared parenting legislation in Illinois, and we're lucky to have a couple of very good psychologists on the team. And one of them testified, and this is at the House of Representatives, a special committee for this, that they analyze why judges, roughly 80% of the time will reflexively give custody to the mother. And if the dad's lucky, he's got an Uncle Dad schedule, might be every other weekend and Wednesday night, if he's lucky.
Right. If he's lucky to be a visitor.
Yeah, and they investigated this. And what they found out is the judges say, when they were asked, why do you do it? Well, that's just because what everyone else does. So, which is a staggering confession.
That absolutely is.
I think that's growing, though, that now there's more fathers getting half-time. And
I think it's because there's more awareness that's coming out,
so
and I think there's
it's becoming
more
equalized in that area.
Yes, and absolutely, and the groups that we're involved in, I think, is actually the voice of the American people, and you have your group too, that are coming out, and people are starting to wake up and realize something's very wrong in America. We have, this past Father's Day, 24 million children without a father. There's something very wrong with that number. That should not even be happening. One child without a father is bad, but 24 million, and it stems from our courts, and what our courts are allowing, they're condoning, what they're doing, they're responsible for much of the alienation, because they have every reason to stop it.
They could stop it.
They can stop it, and they could make things equal, and they could make things right for these kids. These children had two parents before the divorce. There's no reason why they shouldn't have them afterwards. And for courts to come in and say all of a sudden, you're no longer allowed to be a parent in your child's life is just ludicrous. It makes no sense. And you know what? They're making dysfunctional children because of it.
Very much so.
Very much so. And it's very disheartening to see that they would allow the children of America, our future, to be so destroyed when it could be so easily fixed.
They are empowering abusers. They are facilitating the agenda of abusers.
I agree.
That's crazy.
That they're absolutely
true.
empowering. And the more power that they do give to that other parent is what's really breaking these kids, because they're using these children as pawns with that power to destroy another human being, mostly dads.
Right.
Mostly dads. There are moms out there, but most of them
And
are
it's
dads.
under the guise of stopping any potential abuse. We don't know. They
Yeah.
say, but we got to protect the kids. And then what do? They really harm the kids.
Well,
like
that's
you're
just it. They're
saying.
not protecting the children.
Yeah.
It's not in their best interest because they're making things worse. That's why the stats for the drug abuse are worried about an opioid. Well, you know what? If they had two parents in their lives and they had somebody watching all these children so they weren't wandering the streets or getting mixed in with the wrong crowds, we wouldn't have to worry about an opioid problem. Because they have access to this. That's the problem. Because that one parent can't keep eyes on that kid all the time, but though they like us to think that they do. And that other parent, it's not fair for the other parent to be taken out of the picture when they can actually prevent that child. Hey, do things. Go play basketball. Go swimming. Go play miniature golf. Do something with these kids. So, all right, guys, I guess we're going to be wrapping this up. I want to thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
tonight. I appreciate this,
My
and I
pleasure,
wish
my
we had more
pleasure.
time to talk about. We're going to do this again, though.
Thanks for having us.
And everybody, please, I'm going to put this on you again. Please just write this information down. Family Legal Action Foundation. You can email me at familylegalaction@gmail.com. Please contact me at any time. Thank you so much. And thank you, guys, and I enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I look forward to
Pleasure.
talking to you guys
Thanks.
again. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.